Hello and welcome to Salon Conversations. Today is I think, a very big topic, and so I don't believe I can share my thoughts on being kindness, and kind people in one podcast because it would go for a week. So, what I've chosen to do is talk about kindness in general, um, and kindness in a way that isn't about personal kindness. Like, I think we need to be kind to ourselves, and that's a whole other topic. But I think today I want to talk about kindness in general, as in that we're just wired for it or we're not. So I have had a big change in my life, and I think it's because I wasn't fulfilled as a person. I felt like I was doing a lot of things for a lot of people, but I also held a lot of resentment for that. And that caused me to really unpack my life and have a good think about where I'm up to, which I think is probably pretty common for women, that are children are leaving the home and they're empty nesting, and you kind of look back on your life and think, well, wow, like raising children was the biggest job. It was the biggest 40-year job, right? Not even, because it happens long before you have children. And I think I will agree that you will always be concerned about your children, no matter where they are, probably more concerned about them if you've had a bit of a falling out than when they're happy. I think the best time in your life as a parent is when your children are happy and they don't need you. But that also comes from a place of, what did I do for all those years? And there's almost a sense of it's being thrown out of a job that you did really well, right? A job that you weren't paid for, you did really well, and then the boss says, we don't need you. And you think, really? And that could be a big problem. Now, for some people, it doesn't. It just morphs into the grandchildren. And so therefore, a lot of parents just raise the grandchildren or part raise the grandchildren. I don't have a challenge with that. But there also comes with raising grandchildren. Quite often there's a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law. And so the dynamic changes along the way. And I think it's pretty common at the age of 50 for women to start to think about, well, hang on, what's going on here? Like, what's a fair go? And I know I did. Menopause did a number on me, and it had me doubting myself. I really lost my confidence and where I was going and what I was doing. And what I didn't realize at the time was all of the lessons or mishaps or falling down that I had were all shaping me to be a better, well-rounded, kinder person. And I think that's the bit I didn't understand. I thought I was a kind person, and I guess compared to some people I was, but I was a selfish person. And I think we're all guilty of being selfish people. And I think kindness is probably the opposite to selfishness. So we have to look after ourselves. And I know that to be true because when you are in a really good place, then it's actually being kind to the people who love you because they don't have to worry about you when you're in a good place. So we have to look after ourselves. So we have to put ourselves first in many, many ways. But there's also a part of us that is innately selfish, and it just is. That's the way we're wired. And it's a mixture between the balance of putting others before you in a way of service and thinking about others rather than yourself, or being self-centered. So there's a really a big bag of conversation there. When I look back over my childhood and where did I get my lessons about kindness, um, I got my lessons from my parents. Like, my dad was a very hard man, a very, very hard man. It was black, it was white, there was no grey, and that's how it was. And my mother was not like that at all. My mother could see the good in a person even when they were behaving badly. She was a person who could show kindness in a situation where my father couldn't. Like, my father would make a decision on something and that's how it is. It's right or it's wrong. Whereas my mother would always try and put herself in what's going on for that person, or, oh, well, never mind. She was a bit of a sweep it under the rug. Let's not have a discussion about it. Now, as nice as that was, nothing really got changed or fixed, or she wasn't an action taker. She was a peacemaker. Whereas my dad was an action taker. So he was the person that people would go to with big problems and he would give them their opinion and they were very grateful. Whereas my mum, if you went to my mum for an opinion, she'd go, oh, well, it'll always work out. And you think, well, that's not very helpful, mum. But it actually is because I think the older I get, the more I realize that like you have less control over your life than you think. Like you think you're in control of this and you think you're in control of that. No, I actually don't think you're in control of that much, to be honest. I think you can be in control of your decision in the very next now. Like I can decide if I'm going to do this podcast or not, but I can't control whether someone's going to listen to it or find it helpful or whatever. So I'm going to do it anyway. So whether or not someone listens to it, I don't have any control over that and I don't spend any time doing that. Whereas there was a time when I'd think, well, I don't know if I want to do that because I don't know if it's of any value. So I almost needed an outcome before I would get started. Now I don't think like that. Like I just do it anyway. I just do what I want to do in the day that I'm in today. And that's been a really big shift for me. And it makes you realize that people will come and go in your life. Some people will just move away, or you'll move away physically or emotionally, but you actually don't and can't control those outcomes. As you get older, your parents will pass away, and you start to reflect a thing about what were the lessons they taught me, or like you start to think a lot more about where did you come from. And I think also you do that more when your children have children and find partners and you think, wow, that's interesting. I wonder why she's doing that, or I wonder why he's doing that. And there's nearly always a reason. And the thing that I loved about my mum is she never got too involved in anyone's life. She just was, oh, well, they'll work it out. She kind of just trusted or believed that a person would sort it out. And if they hadn't sorted out, it's kind of their journey. Whereas my dad was the other way, like get involved and tell you straight up what he thought you were doing wrong, which I don't think I was as bad as my dad. Maybe someone might argue, but I really have spent the last probably 15 years really wanting to channel my mum's energy. I think the thing that I loved about my mum is, people took her places and she was just easy company, whereas my dad wasn't. He wanted to know who was going to be there and what time we would be coming back. And it was hard work. And I don't ever want to be hard work. I want to be kind. And I think my mum, in a word, was a really kind person. And it's interesting because my dad was a Roman Catholic and my mother was of Church of England. So some people probably don't know much about religion, but because there's less of it around now in Australia. But the Catholics are very they feel they're right. They feel like they are the right religion and they're very pig-headed as far as I can tell. And they think anything that's not Catholic is like second grade. So of course, Dad wanted to marry my mum. So if in order for them to get married in church, my mum would have to change and be Catholic. And she did. And what was interesting is my mum took the nine children to church every Sunday, like little ducklings. We followed her up to mass every Sunday, and my dad never went. And I think, like, these are the signals or the signs that you get along the way. Like, Dad was a provider, and yes, he was away working. He used to work as a bookmaker, so he was away every Saturday night. But I don't even know if he would have gone if he was home. Like, he was just, these are the rules. This is how it is. And my mum was this person who, I remember her telling me, you don't have to have many rules. She said, just don't do to anybody else that you wouldn't want done to yourself. And that's the way she showed kindness, right? So if you're going to take that person's push bike, or if you're going to, not invite a person to the party because you don't like them for some reason, then would you like it if someone did that to you? And it was always a way to measure your behavior. And I think that's the way that mum was just kind, but she was kind every day. She practiced kindness, right? She wasn't just in paper. So I think for me, the reason I lost faith in any sort of religion, I was about, I don't know, 15, 16. And I'd seen people that weren't like my mum. I'd seen people at the church, the Catholic church, that were reading the prayers and taking up the offertory and doing jobs of service, but they were gossipy people or they were quite nasty people. And I thought, how does that work? I don't understand how you can, be like a high up in the religious sect and yet you're not a nice person. It really turned me away. And then because I had my dad's makeup, I thought, that's it. I don't want anything to do with any religion ever. And that was my hard and fast way of being. But it was funny because as my mother got older, she used to always say, pray to Saint Anthony if you lost this, or you better say your prayers. But it was always about praying and, being a good person. But she stopped going to church. When she moved away from the community at home in the country town, she didn't find another church, which I thought was pretty interesting. But she said, oh, I don't need to go. I can pray anywhere, she said. And so I probably didn't take much notice of um, mum's kindness until this last year when I've started to think about, what is kindness? And for the most part, I teach salon owners to be kind to themselves more than anything else. But this conversation's about general kindness. And so an example of kindness, I think, is when it's a fairness. It's like being fair, or it's being equal, or it's less judging. So say, for example, you see someone and they've got like 6 or 7 dogs on a lead and they can't control, and the dogs are barking. And then you might think to yourself, why would you have that many dogs? Like, that's dumb. That's so silly. And a kind person would just smile at the owner who owns the dogs and don't make that judgment. So even though you're not mean to the person, just your thinking, I think, is channeled through you and out into them. So kindness is just if my mother was there and she saw that, she'd say, well, that person certainly loves dogs. That's all she'd say. Whereas my dad would say, he's an idiot. I don't know why he would have dogs. He can't control them, so why would he have a dog? And that would be the judging way that my father would be unkind, and the kind way that my mother would think, well, that person really loves dogs. They must have a kind heart. And that was it. And so neither of them took any action or did anything, but there's just a filter of kindness through my mother's veins, and there is a filter of judgment through my dad's veins. So I think that they sort of yin and yanged each other a bit. But I just thought my mum was always, she could always see the shiny side of things. I remember at my 21st birthday, I was dating this bloke who was a bit dark. I don't know, he's Jamaican, but he wasn't really, really dark skinned, but it was very clear that he wasn't, Caucasian. Anyway, I said to my older sister, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should tell mum and dad before they come that Ash was his name, that Ash is dark skinned? And my sister said to me, she was about 14 years old, and she said to me, well, if you say something to mum and dad, that implies that you think there might be a problem. But she said, if you don't say anything, it's like, well, you didn't even notice. Like, what does it matter? And so if they're going to be concerned about an racial, relationship with their child, then they have to bring it up, not you. And I thought, oh, that's so good. How good to have an older sister. So we went to the party and everything was fine. My dad had the flu and didn't come. It's about 4.5 hours drive. So he stayed home, which was convenient for him because he didn't like parties anyway. So then we had a lovely night, and about a day or so later, when my mum had returned home, she must have mentioned it, or somebody's mentioned it to Dad. And he rang up, and I answered the phone. In those days, you couldn't see who rang. You just said hello, and then there was a person on the other end. And I said, hello, and he said, you're not going to marry him, are you? I said, hello. Who am I talking to? Because I knew who it was, but I just pretend. He goes, who it is. It's your father, the darky. Are you going to marry him? I'm thinking, oh my God, like, what do you do? And I said, Dad, who would know? Like, it's really no problem. He said, well, those kids, if you have kids, they'll be teased at school, and one will be light brown and one will be dark brown. I think you really need to have a good damn think about it. I said, okay, bye. And I was just flabbergasted. And I thought, how does this even work? Like, I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, poof. Anyway, no sooner had sat down and had a think about it, my mum rings back. She goes, oh, I'm so sorry about your father. I don't know who told him or something, but look, I thought he was a lovely boy. He would have been 30, probably, maybe 25. I thought he was a lovely boy, and he had a lovely pink jumper on. I thought, oh, mum, that's just what she does. She just thinks, and whatever happens, you'll work it out. I'm sure you will. That was it. And she said, and there's something I never really told anybody, she said. And I thought, oh God, she must have had a fling with a black bloke. She said, I had a really big crush on Sidney Poitier. So Sidney Poitier, for those who were too young, he was in a film called To Serve with Love, and he was this most handsome African American. And Mum's secret was that she had a crush on him. I thought, wow. Like, you have to remember that my mother was born in, I don't know, the 1930s, I think, or 40, no, 20s, I don't know, anyway. If she's alive today, she'd be 100. So yes, probably 1926, I think she was born. And you just think, wow, but I didn't look on my dad with hatred or anything. I just looked and thought, wow, we've come a long way. And my dad, I believe he genuinely was concerned for me because he didn't want me to have to suffer through kids being teased at school. Like, seriously? Um, but my mum just has this lovely way. And to me, that's kindness, right? That's kindness every single way. Kind that she believed that I could work things out. Kindness that she waited till dad was out of the room so she wouldn't upset him and she just whispered to me that she had a thing for Sydney 48. I just think, I just love that woman. She was just kind. And even little things like I can remember when my twins were born, and anybody who sees twins in a pram is pretty fascinated. And they were 18 months younger than my daughter. And what I used to love is when someone would come up to the twin pram, but before they said anything to the twins, were cute, fat little babies, they always approached my daughter, who was 18 months older. So let's say the twins are 6 months old, then my daughter would have been two, and they'd say, "Are these your brothers? Can I have a look at them?" And she'd go, "Oh, yes." And she was so happy to show them her brothers. Whereas people who don't think about kindness first, they would just look in the pram, make a big fuss of the babies, and then secondly, consider my daughter. And to me, that was a real example of someone who's just naturally kind. Like, they just accept that their reactions affect everybody on the planet, and they do. And so I would be a person who'd forget to notice the older dog or notice the 3-year-old, and I might just be fascinated with the baby because, and it wouldn't come from a place of nastiness. It was just that I hadn't really developed my kindness muscle, I think, back then, whereas now I would always develop my kindness muscle. And I think the other way that I've developed my kindness muscle is I don't presume that people want my opinion, or I don't presume that people would like to hear what I have to say on it. I ask, I said, would you like me to make a suggestion, or would you like me to um, add to that? And I thought, wow, like, that's a whole new way of doing things. And I learned that from, I think I was in a room with, like on, I think it was Anthony Robbins' partner or wife, Sage. I think she said, she was interviewing someone and she said, would you like me to give you my thoughts on that? And I thought, wow, what a lovely, a kind way of doing it, instead of thinking, I know the answer and I need to give it to you. You don't know that the person actually wants your information. And I think that's kind of a new level of kindness for me. I think I was always kind to, like anybody who had a new baby, I would make a batch of soup and drop it round to their house. Or, I thought about not giving them a white teddy bear. I gave them something to eat. I'd make a lasagna or something. And so inside me was always this kindness, but I think I've taken it to a new level. And like, in ways I have made an agreement with myself that I will never gossip anymore. And so that's even though it doesn't, probably the person doesn't hear it, but if you say something, you think, oh, why does she go out with that bloke? I don't know. Like, I just think he's such a loser. And he could be such a loser, but it's none of my business. And so I wouldn't say that anymore. If someone was saying that in my company, now I would say, well, I'm sure she's got her reasons, and I don't know that it's really any of our business. And then they kind of look at you sideways, and I think, well, that's just, and I say, I've got a new rule where I don't want to gossip. And because it could get back to that person, and I want to know that every night when I go to bed that I didn't cause anyone any trouble by being unkind. And I think just talking about someone in a way that you wouldn't talk about them if they were there is an act of kindness. And it's a muscle you need to practice, you need to grow, because I don't believe it happens overnight. I just think that we just have to practice these things. It's like, whether you exercise or eating well, it's not like, okay, that's it, I'm never eating food that's not good for me ever again. Like, you just can't do that. I just think it's a practice, and you just build on the little bits that you learn. And at first you might stop ordering Uber Eats, and you might say, no, I'm not going to order Uber Eats. I'm going to start to cook my own food. And so maybe you were doing all Uber Eats 3 nights a week, where you go down to one, and then maybe you do that for a month or two, and then you say, no, I don't. And then it's occasional. So either way, whatever changes you would like to make in your life, I don't believe they're instant. And even if you make a big change, you'll still slip back and go. And then that's about being kind to yourself and going, well, you know what? Okay, you did slip, but you've come a long way. So keep going, and I think it's just really important to know that I don't think kindness, you can't reach it and say, that's it, I'm done. I think it's a next level of kindness. It's another layer, um, it's another way of being. And so I think it's easier to be kind when you're in a good place. I think it's easier to be kind when, like you might donate money or donate your time, and that's easier when you have the time and you have the money. But I think it's doing it when you don't feel like it. It's like being kind when you can't be stuffed. That's another whole level of kindness. So it's a muscle, it's a practice, and I think you just keep working on it. And one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of months is that when you are grateful for things, and when you do a little bit of a depack at the end of each day and you think, was I kind today? Was I selfish? Did I put myself first? Did I gossip about anyone? Did I make judgment of people or places or things? Like you might make a judgment and say, oh, I don't know how anyone lives in, and name the suburb. But if you're kind, you'd say, oh, different, isn't it? It's fascinating how some people really love to live there, yet it wouldn't be a place that I would live. So that's just another act of kindness instead of saying, oh, it's a terrible place. I don't know how anyone lives there. Like that's just not being kind, because some people do live there. And who cares? We can't all live where you want to live. It's not going to work. So just being kindness sort of gives people the space to be themselves. And that's what I want. I just want to be me. I just want to let go of trying to control things or expect things to be in a certain way. And I just want to, as Mel Robbins says, just let them. And the second part of let them is, and then let me, right? And if I want to keep working on my spirituality and being a kinder and more gentle person, then let me. And you do you. And I'm not worried about you not being kind. I think if you're listening to this, it's because you are interested or curious about what kindness is and perhaps what my thoughts on kindness are. And I think for me, to be kind is just to put myself in the person's shoes and think about, how can I serve this person? How can I be of help to this person? And sometimes that's just saying nothing. And just let them go and just say, you know what? I reckon you're smart. I reckon you'll work it out. You're a clever girl. And sometimes that's all you need to do. You don't have to say, right, do this and then do this and do this and come back when you've done that. Like that's sort of it's my father's way of thinking. Whereas my mum would say the simplest things to me sometimes and just set me free. I'd be on the phone saying, oh, I can't believe he's doing this. And now he's at this age and he's done that and he got into trouble at kindergarten. And she'd say, oh, kids will do that. That's what kids will do. You wonder why you have them sometimes. Never mind. He's very handsome though. And she didn't solve a damn thing for me. She didn't say, right, do this or do that, or I did this. She didn't. She just made light of the situation. And sometimes that's all you need to do to be kind. And I used to just love that. I just love that about my mum. I guess she just had this gentle way that oozed out of her, and it was really lovely to be in her company. So my mission is to be more and more kind. And because I know what it feels like to be around someone who's kind. So think about that. Put yourself in their shoes and think about, why is this person like they are? Because there will be a reason. And if you can kind of tap into their way of thinking, and give them the benefit of the doubt. And one of the things that I used to think about people was like, there's no one I don't like until I get to know them. When I get to know a person, I can find a way to like them because I know what they're like. And I'll give you an example. In the salon many, many years ago, there was a lady came in and she probably was 40 at the time. I don't know. I was probably 30 at the time. So she seemed older than me. And she had this little boy. And while she was waiting, the little boy had his head up her shirt and she was clearly breastfeeding him. And so he was 3, maybe 4. And I remember thinking, oh, this is the old judging me. I was thinking, oh, who feeds a baby at 4? Like, seriously. I thought that's a bit weird. But anyway, and I kept looking out the side of my eyes going, yep, she's absolutely feeding him. And she was quite a thin lady. And she was a bit of a nervous kind of lady. You know, some people can be a bit, can't sit still type of person. She was a bit like that. Anyway, she came over and I went to cut his hair and I got like a, I think it was the phone books that were covered in something like not glad wrap, like contact, and it made like a booster seat. So I put the booster seat on. It's long before we had fancy booster seats, and I put that on the chair. And then I went to pick the little boy up to put him on the chair, and she said, "Oh no, I don't want him on there in case he falls off." I'm thinking, why would he fall off? He's 4. And I didn't say anything, but once again, I was unkind in my thoughts. I was not unkind in my actions, and she would not have. I don't believe. She might have felt it, but I felt like I kept it to myself. Probably I didn't now that I think about it. Anyway, and I popped him up on the chair and I just, I went along with cutting his hair. And he was a nice little man. And I got talking to her because that's what you do. And then what I realized was I had no reason to judge it. This woman had tried, I can't remember, like 12, 13 years or something on IVF. And this was her one and only child. And so, she would have been breastfeeding him because she would have believed that that was the best thing for him. And she didn't want him to fall off the chair. And so I'm pretty sure it would cause that kid some problems down the track because his mother was probably over servicing him. But it made me like the lady, or it helped me to understand her. And I thought, well, I reckon if I'd been on that many IVF cycles, I can't remember how many she told me, but over the 11 or 12 years, it was just horrendous. So you can imagine not only the mental anguish, but the financial burden and the fact that she actually got this child in the end. And so you can kind of understand, why she would be so anxious and stressed over his every move. Now, that's not how I would like to raise a child, but that's only me. And I got pregnant without even having sex. I don't even know how I conceived the twins. And the doctor said, well, he just laughed and said, well, you must have at some point. I said, well, I must have been asleep because my little girl was like awake all night. So obviously that was the free entertainment during those horrific months of her not sleeping through the night. And I conceived twins without trying, and I was taking the pills. So for me to think, how do you go 12 years on an IVF program? Like I just can't, blows my brain. But it does make you have a kindness streak towards a woman who finally got the baby. And that's an example of being kind, even though it wasn't my first thought, but you come around to it and she become a regular client and they end up doing her hair and the husband's, and like you just be kind. And so I think if you can put yourself in their shoes and try and work out why is this person like they are, and there is always reason, always. Sometimes they'll never share, but if you go back to anybody's childhood in the same way as I've recently unpacked my childhood, I've also helped my children to understand why their father and I did some of the things we did because that's how we were channeled. So it's not wrong, it's not right, it just is. And I think if you have a streak of kindness in you, which often appears more as you get older, certainly has for me, you can think about how do you make this world a better place? And imagine if everybody thought like that. Imagine if everybody was kinder to everyone else, who was thoughtful to everyone else. What a great world. That's a world I want to live in. So hopefully that gives you something to think about. And if there's any way that I can help you and you want to unpack something a bit private, then we can always have a chat about that. I love helping people. It's just my joy. I don't even know why they pay me actually, because I just do it anyway. Probably not a good business model, but it's just a lovely, lovely way of being, knowing that just being kind and wanting to help another person can make you a living. Pretty damn cool. Have a good day, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Bye for now.